I sat still in that cold courtroom, my palms resting flat on the table as I watched Daniel sign the divorce papers with a smirk stretching across his face. That smug little smile. 8 years of marriage, and this is how it ended for him. A casual flick of the wrist and a gleam of arrogance in his eyes like he'd just won something. He didn't even look at me, just leaned back in his chair like he was sealing a business deal. And maybe, in his mind, that's all this ever was, a transaction. One where he thought he walked away with everything, and I'd be left with nothing but shattered illusions and the silk robe I brought into his penthouse. But Daniel had no idea. He had no clue what I'd been building. No clue that while he was parading around with his new fiancée, the fresh-faced assistant he swore was just ambitious and purely professional, I had spent years turning what he mocked as a passion project into a multi-million-dollar company, all under his nose. All while he thought I was just wasting time between brunches and Botox. Across the courtroom, I saw his lawyer lean over and whisper something to him. They both chuckled. My attorney, Lena Torres, glanced at me calmly and nodded once. Her signal. We were ready. The judge was about to read my full financial disclosure, and in less than 5 minutes, Daniel's smirk would vanish, just like all the power he thought he had over me. But before I tell you how that smirk disappeared and the entire room went silent, I want to take you back. Back to where it started. Back to a girl from Savannah who arrived in Seattle with a hand-me-down laptop, student loans, and a stubborn belief that she could build something for herself. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever smiled through someone calling you small, if you've ever pretended not to notice the eye rolls and dismissive laughs, only to come back stronger, then this story is for you. Because I wasn't always the woman sitting in that courtroom in a tailored navy dress and quiet confidence. I used to be the girl who bit her tongue to keep the peace, who shrunk herself to fit into someone else's life. I used to be Mrs. Hayes, the lucky one. But lucky girls don't build empires in secret. Let me tell you how I got here, and how the man who thought he was leaving me in the dust ended up choking on it. I was born and raised in Savannah, Georgia, a place where the air smelled like salt and magnolias, and people still waved from their porches. My parents ran a small repair shop, and I grew up sweeping floors between homework and sketching wireframes in the margins of my school notebooks. Tech wasn't exactly big in my hometown, but I knew what I wanted, to design something that helped people, not just looked pretty. So, at 22, I packed up and moved to Seattle. I had no connections, just a degree in UX design, an obsession with clean user flows, and enough grit to survive on ramen and freelance gigs. I met Daniel at a charity gala for children's mental health programs. I was there because I had helped design the app interface they were unveiling that night. He was there because it looked good on his LinkedIn profile. Even back then, he had this air about him. Expensive suit, perfect posture, talking like the world owed him its secrets. He came up to me with a champagne glass in one hand and a cocky grin. You look lost, he said. Let me guess. Intern? I should have walked away right then. But instead I laughed. Nervous. Flattered, maybe. I told him I was actually part of the design team. He raised an eyebrow, as if surprised someone like me. Southern accent, simple black dress, no last name from a legacy university had anything to do with building a product. And yet, that night, he didn't leave my side. He asked questions, listened intently, even made me feel like what I said mattered. Looking back, I know what it was. He wasn't interested in me. He was intrigued by the idea of me. The contradiction, the novelty. In the weeks that followed, Daniel swept me off my feet. Dinners at rooftop restaurants, weekend getaways to Napa, little boxes from Cartier that arrived just because. I had never lived like that. He made me feel special, elevated. Like maybe I really did belong in rooms I had always tiptoed into. When he proposed 6 months later at a cabin in Whistler, snow falling all around us, I didn't even pause. I said yes. God, I said yes so fast. His family was less enthusiastic. At our engagement dinner, his mother, Vivian, gave me a smile that could cut glass and said, well, I suppose every empire needs a Cinderella story. I laughed politely, even though I felt like I'd been slapped. I told myself it was just a slip, that they'd warm up to me. But the truth was, they never did. I wasn't one of them. I didn't summer in the Hamptons or know how to pronounce Bordeaux without hesitating. Still, I believed that love, our love, was enough. I didn't know then that Daniel didn't want a partner. He wanted a polished accessory. And I was about to play the part a little too well. The day I moved into Daniel's penthouse, I remember standing in the center of the living room, trying to take it all in. Floor-to-ceiling windows, Italian leather furniture, a view of Elliott Bay so clean it looked painted. But the place felt cold. Not just in color, but in spirit. There were no photos, no books, no signs of life, just curated luxury, like a magazine spread no one actually lived in. I tried to bring in pieces of myself, a framed photo of my parents, a colorful throw I had crocheted in college, some houseplants to give the place warmth. By the next morning, the photo had been moved to a side drawer. The throw was replaced by a cashmere blanket from Bergdorf's. The plants were deemed messy and boxed for donation. "This space needs to reflect us," Daniel said when I asked. But he didn't mean us. He meant him. That's how it started. Over the next year, my world became smaller and shinier. My favorite coffee shop was replaced with a membership-only club he preferred. My old friends didn't understand our lifestyle, and I slowly stopped hearing from them. He wanted me to quit my job, said it wasn't necessary, that I should relax, enjoy what he could provide. "You don't need to exhaust yourself building things," he said one night while swirling scotch in a crystal glass. "That's what people with no options do." It was subtle at first. Suggestions disguised as compliments. "You're too good for deadlines and clients." Then it turned into criticism. "Still working on that little app idea? It's sweet you want to stay busy." I kept going for a while, freelancing for small startups, refining prototypes of a wellness app I believed in. I built user journeys in secret, coded late at night when he was asleep. But with every belittling comment, it got harder to keep the fire alive. He tracked every expense. My card declined at a bookstore once because he had reallocated our budget to cover a weekend getaway for himself. "Let me know next time you want to buy something unnecessary," he said without looking up from his phone. "You're not budgeting like someone who doesn't bring in income." I wanted to scream. I was building something. Maybe small, maybe slow, but real. Instead, I smiled and nodded. Every time I did, it chipped away at something inside me. And yet I stayed. Because I thought maybe he'd come around. Maybe he'd see me again. The girl he met at that gala, the woman with drive and dreams and vision. But Daniel didn't want to see me. He wanted to shrink me. And for a while, I let him. I don't remember the exact day the shift happened. It wasn't dramatic. No big argument. No lightning strike. Just a quiet moment, sitting alone in the massive penthouse kitchen, staring into a cold cup of chamomile tea, realizing I didn't recognize the woman holding the mug. That night, while Daniel was on a networking retreat in Vail, I pulled out my old sketchbooks. Wireframes, UI ideas, notes for an app I had dreamed about building for people like me, women with ADHD trying to manage life without chaos. I stared at those pages until sunrise. Then I opened my laptop and started working. Slowly, quietly, methodically, I began to build. I signed up for online courses under a pseudonym. I retaught myself the code I hadn't used since college. Every day, I worked an hour longer than the day before. Daniel never noticed. If anything, he was pleased that I seemed more occupied and less emotional. He had no idea I was becoming dangerous, in the best way possible. I called it Clarity Nest, a simple, calming interface that helped users with executive dysfunction plan their day in 3 steps. I kept it basic at first. Built it for me. Then I added a mood tracker, reminders, habit nudges. Something about it felt right. Not flashy, not trendy, just real. The first person I showed it to was my friend Harper's little brother, Noah, a brilliant high schooler constantly overwhelmed by tasks. He tried the app for a week and texted me, "I actually remembered to eat lunch today. You're a wizard." It was the first time in months I cried, and not from sadness. With that small encouragement, I registered an LLC under my maiden name, Victoria Hale Technologies, and opened a business bank account. I kept deposits small at first, just enough to hide under our joint financial radar. The rest went into savings and software. I converted the guest bedroom into a workspace under the guise of organizing my hobbies. Daniel never asked questions. As long as I looked pretty at his corporate dinners and didn't interrupt golf season, I could have been training to be an astronaut and he wouldn't have blinked. Then came the bakery conference. A local startup accelerator was running a pitch contest for community-focused tech. I submitted Clarity Nest anonymously, not expecting anything. 2 weeks later, I got an email. You've been selected as a finalist. Please prepare a live demo. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. It was happening. In a world that constantly told me to stay small, I was building something big, and no one, especially not Daniel, could see it coming. The week of the pitch competition, Daniel was unusually attentive. He brought home takeout from my favorite Vietnamese place. He asked about my day, barely waiting for the answer, of course, but still, it was off-brand. I should have known something was up. One evening, while folding laundry, I noticed a delicate velvet box had slipped out of the inner pocket of Daniel's coat. Curious, I opened it. Inside was a bracelet. Thin, rose gold, with a tiny diamond charm. Not my style at all. But the engraving? To L, with all my fire. D. My stomach turned. I couldn't breathe. I sat on the edge of our bed, that bed I had tried so hard to make ours, holding a love note from a man who looked me in the eye every morning and said, "Have a good day, sweetheart." And then I started noticing everything. The perfume that lingered on his shirts wasn't mine. The weekend client dinner at a winery outside Spokane, which didn't appear on his company's calendar. The fact that he always locked his phone now and slept with it under his pillow. I didn't confront him. Not yet. I watched. I waited. Then, the day before the pitch demo, he told me he'd be heading to our lake house for a solitude weekend. Something about unplugging, resetting, recalibrating. I nodded and said nothing. But the moment his car pulled out of the garage, I grabbed my keys and laptop, drove in the opposite direction, and called a private investigator. 3 days later, I had everything. Photos, hotel records, even screenshots of texts between Daniel and Elle, aka Lena Cole, his firm's 26-year-old communications assistant. One image showed them in front of the lake house fireplace. Her wearing his Harvard sweatshirt. Him holding a glass of wine and smiling like he'd found some fairy tale ending. That same evening, while he was still gone, I walked into the lake house. Everything looked untouched. Perfectly curated. A second home I had helped design but never truly belonged to. And then I saw it. Her duffel bag, still on the floor of the master bedroom, a pair of heels under the bed, an empty champagne bottle on the nightstand, the matching bracelet box in the trash. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I took out my phone, stood in the doorway, and recorded a slow, sweeping video of the room. The caption was only 4 words. "This is our bed." I never posted it. I didn't need to, because I had just made a silent decision that would change everything. When Daniel walked in 2 days later, all smiles, I was sitting at the kitchen counter. "I want a divorce," I said simply, handing him a thick envelope. He blinked. "What?" "I know about Lena, and I'm not asking. I'm telling." Daniel stared at the envelope like it might explode. When he finally opened it and saw the letterhead from Lena Torres's law office, his jaw tightened. The same man who once breezed through hostile takeovers now looked like a deer in headlights. "You've been preparing this?" he asked quietly. "For a while now," I replied, steady. "Long enough to know exactly what I'm entitled to." He scoffed, regaining a sliver of arrogance. "You think you're going to take half of what my name built?" I didn't respond. I didn't need to. That silence, it unnerved him more than shouting ever could. That night, he didn't sleep at home, probably with Lena. Good, I needed the space. First thing the next morning, I backed up all documents related to Clarity Nest to encrypted cloud storage, registered copyright protections I had been delaying, and transferred company-related assets into a trust. Everything Lena Torres had advised. We weren't just preparing for divorce, we were preparing for war. Over the next few weeks, Daniel's mask of charm began to crack. He spread lies to mutual acquaintances, that I was emotionally unstable, that I had been draining his wealth, that I had cheated. Some people believed him. Others didn't care enough to ask me the truth. But Sophia, my first investor and now close friend, never wavered. She brought wine, warmth, and hard truths. "Let him try," she said, waving a spoonful of risotto. "He's never faced a woman who knows what she's worth." Meanwhile, Clarity Nest was no longer just a prototype. After the pitch demo, where I came in second but gained 2 angel investors, I doubled down. I hired a part-time developer. Natalie Ruiz, a former therapist turned UX consultant, joined as an advisor. Our user base grew. Reviews were glowing. I remained invisible on paper. Still, Mrs. Hayes, still with no declared income. We did this intentionally. Lena said it best. Let him keep underestimating you. It worked. His initial settlement offer? A one-time payout of $60,000. The return of my belongings. And 3 months of transition rent assistance. Generous, he called it. Infuriating, Lena corrected. We filed for full financial discovery. Daniel, confident as ever, dragged his feet. Claimed most assets were inherited. Claimed our condo was a gift from his parents. Claimed I contributed nothing of value during our marriage. He didn't know I had screenshots, statements, even voice memos of conversations where he admitted to moving joint funds into offshore accounts. He didn't know I had tracked our spending for 3 years in a spreadsheet labeled recipe ideas. And he definitely didn't know I was now worth more than he ever imagined. While Daniel postured and lied, I built. While he played victim in tailored suits, I was laying the final bricks of my empire. And soon I'd let the whole courtroom watch it unfold. The morning of the hearing, I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in a charcoal gray suit with clean lines and 0 distractions. I wore no jewelry except for a silver ring I had bought myself the day I signed Clarity Nest's first contract. My symbol of ownership, of self. Daniel was already there, flanked by 2 lawyers in matching navy suits and smug expressions. He spotted me and smirked, just like the day he signed our separation papers. "Nice of you to show up," he said casually, straightening his cuffs. "Try not to cry when the numbers come out." I didn't even blink. Inside, Judge Everett, a no-nonsense woman with a crisp tone and sharper gaze, took her seat and began the proceedings. Daniel's team opened with a carefully scripted narrative. Daniel as the patient, generous husband who supported his wife's unprofitable interests while managing the finances. According to them, I had no income, no assets, and had contributed nothing substantial to the marriage. I could feel my blood warming under my skin, but I waited. When it was Lena's turn, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She simply passed out documents, transaction histories, asset transfers, calendar logs showing Daniel's client meetings at spas and resorts, often booked in 2 names. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Hayes, why were these joint funds transferred without your wife's consent?" Daniel's lawyer cleared his throat. "Those were business-related decisions." "Interesting," Judge Everett said. "There's a note here for a romantic getaway with an employee. Does that fall under client development?" Daniel shifted in his seat. "I don't recall the details." "Of course you don't," Lena said calmly. Then she nodded at me. I stood, heart pounding. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit my financial disclosure." Daniel laughed under his breath. Judge Everett opened the sealed envelope. The room went silent as she scanned the first page, then the second. Her eyebrows rose. "According to this statement," she said slowly, "Mrs. Hale is the sole owner of Clarity Nest, a mental health tech startup valued at $4.2 million. Daniel's chair creaked as he sat back. "She also holds an investment portfolio totaling $2.3 million and recently purchased a secondary property in Montana for $610,000 under a registered LLC." The courtroom remained dead quiet. Daniel's face lost all color. His lawyer leaned in, whispering frantically. Judge Everett raised a hand. "I'll remind both parties. This court has no tolerance for dishonesty or manipulation. Mr. Hayes, do you wish to amend your earlier statements regarding your wife's financial standing?" He opened his mouth, closed it, nodded, but it was too late. Lena stood again. "And Your Honor, per Clause 12 in the prenuptial agreement, which Mr. Hayes' counsel included, we request that all assets acquired independently without spousal financial support be ruled separate property." Judge Everett reviewed the clause, then looked up. Well, that changes everything. Judge Everett took a short recess before returning to deliver her ruling. I sat still, hands folded in my lap, while Daniel fidgeted beside his lawyer like a child awaiting punishment. When the judge spoke, her voice was firm. Based on the evidence provided and the terms clearly outlined in the prenuptial agreement, this court recognizes that Clarity Nest and the associated investment accounts are the sole property of Mrs. Hale. I felt the air shift around me. My ears buzzed, not with surprise, but with confirmation. I wasn't asking for permission. I had earned everything I had built. Judge Everett continued. Furthermore, due to Mr. Hayes' repeated failure to disclose financial accounts and his use of marital funds for personal misconduct, the court rules that the division of remaining shared assets shall lean significantly in favor of Mrs. Hale. The condo would be sold. The profits would go largely to me. Daniel's offshore accounts, once hidden, would be taxed and investigated. The final blow? I would owe him nothing, not a cent of spousal support. When court adjourned, Daniel rose slowly, stunned. His expression was no longer smug, it was hollow. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. You planned all this, he whispered as we passed in the hallway. I turned to face him, calm, collected, unshaken. No, Daniel, I survived all this. You just never noticed. He opened his mouth again, but Lena stepped between us. All communication goes through counsel now, she said, then turned and walked me toward the exit. Outside the courthouse, the spring sun hit my face like a blessing. I took a deep breath. For the first time in years, I could breathe without permission. That evening, I met Natalie, Sophia, and Lena for dinner at a quiet rooftop overlooking the city. We toasted, not to revenge, but to resilience. To Victoria, Sophia said, lifting her glass, who built an empire while he was busy building a fantasy. I moved into my new Montana home a week later. Remote, peaceful, and entirely mine. The kind of place where I could write, build, dream, and be. Clarity Nest expanded nationally, partnering with public schools and mental health clinics. I hired a full team, diverse, passionate, mission-driven. We weren't just making money, we were making change. 6 months later, I launched the Hale Foundation, a nonprofit supporting women escaping controlling or financially abusive relationships. We offered startup grants, tech training, and mentorship. Not everyone needed to build a tech empire, but they deserved the chance to build something. A year after the divorce, I ran into Daniel at a gala. He was alone, and his tailored suit didn't hide the fact that his confidence had dulled. You look powerful, he said. I am, I replied, not as a boast, but a truth. That night, alone in my studio, I lit a candle, opened my journal, and wrote down a single sentence. Sometimes the most beautiful empires are built in silence, until they're too big to ignore.